When you see Venezuela in the headlines, it's usually all about crisis, political chaos. But what if I told you the real story is a massive tug of war over two things: oil and power? Today, we're going to unpack how one single resource has fueled a decades-long showdown between this South American nation and the United States.
Okay, to really get this story, you have to start with one just absolutely mind-blowing fact. Venezuela sits on top of the world's largest proven oil reserves. Yeah, you heard that right. Not Saudi Arabia, not Russia, not even the US. Venezuela is number one. And that single piece of information, it's the key to everything that comes next. I mean, look at its location, right there on the Caribbean coast, a super strategic spot. But the real power isn't what you see on the map. It's what's buried underneath it. A truly colossal reserve of oil that promised unimaginable wealth, but as it turns out, would become the source of a massive international fight. And for a while, that promise was very, very real. Oil money fueled everything. The capital, Caracas, was this bustling modern city. For a huge part of the 20th century, Venezuela was seen as this shining example of prosperity in Latin America. But that entire reality was built on a foundation that was about to be shaken to its absolute core. So, how in the world did all of this oil wealth lead to so much conflict? Well, it all kicked off with a huge political shift that put Venezuela on a direct collision course with the United States. When Hugo Chavez came to power, it was a complete and total break from the past. His socialist policies, his really strong anti-US rhetoric, and his new friendships with countries like Cuba and Russia, well, that created immediate friction with Washington. And we're not talking about a minor disagreement here. This was the beginning of a massive geopolitical tug-of-war. This completely new political landscape is what prompted the U.S. to start taking stronger and stronger actions against Venezuela. And that brings us to the central question we're trying to answer here. What was the real motivation behind this whole decades-long pressure campaign? And this is exactly where the story splits into two totally different versions. You see, the official reason from the U.S. has always been that this is about promoting democracy and protecting human rights. But critics, they argue it was never about that. They say the real goal has always been about controlling Venezuela's enormous oil reserves and maintaining influence in the region. So how did this whole fight actually play out on the ground? Well, the main weapon of choice wasn't military might, it was economic. The U.S. strategy centered on sanctions, and believe me, the fallout from that was absolutely devastating. Now, this pressure didn't just appear overnight. It really started building with those early tensions under Chavez. But after he died in 2013 and his successor Nicolas Maduro took over, the sanctions were ramped up, dramatically. The real tipping point, though, was 2019. That's when the U.S. took the incredible step of recognizing an opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the real president, basically trying to cut Maduro's government off from the entire global financial system. These sanctions were aimed right at the heart of Venezuela's economy, its oil, and the result? A complete and catastrophic collapse. Oil exports, which were pretty much the country's only real source of income, just plummeted. It basically starved the government of the money it needed to even function. And this economic collapse wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It had a devastating human cost. We're talking billions in the country's assets frozen. The entire national economy just imploded. This led to massive shortages of food and medicine. And then came hyperinflation, where prices spiraled so out of control that people's entire life savings became worthless almost overnight. All of this, the sanctions, the economic collapse, the human suffering, it brings us right back to that core debate over motivation. Was this incredible pressure, with all of its terrible consequences, really about restoring democracy, or was the goal something else entirely? People who criticize the policy are pretty blunt about it. They argue the sanctions were specifically designed to make life in Venezuela so unbearable that the people, or maybe the military, would just rise up and overthrow the government. So in their view, it was never about reform. It was about regime change, pure and simple. But supporters of the sanctions see it completely differently. They argue that Maduro's government is an authoritarian regime and it's responsible for massive corruption and human rights abuses. From their perspective, sanctions were the only powerful tool they had, short of war, to pressure the government, stop the corruption, and, hopefully, create a path for democracy to return. So, after all these years of sanctions, debate, and crisis, where does that leave us? Well, the final question is still the most important one. Was it all about freedom, or was it about fuel? The reality on the ground today is still incredibly tough. The country is just stuck, caught in this complex web between a government desperate to hold on to control, an economy that's shattered, and the immense pressure from world powers. This geopolitical tug of war is far from over, and the lives of millions of people are still hanging in the balance.
And so we're left with that one lingering question. After looking at all the official reasons and all the devastating consequences, was this whole saga a principled stand for freedom? Or was it, at the end of the day, a cold, calculated struggle for control over the world's largest supply of fuel? That's a question that really gets to the very heart of how our world works.